Well, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie and I have VM the wildebeest on camera with me this afternoon. And driving around on Djuma is James, along with Jean-Dre on camera. Now, we've had a really exciting time, and I just want to do a quick recap on this afternoon's plan and what happened from this morning. Now, we're sitting with all of these vultures, and the reason behind that is that there's a mysterious dead buffalo in the drainage line off to my right. I've returned to Red Dam. Now, this morning I went off to investigate the smell and found the dead buffalo positioned right down in a really steep part of the drainage line. And then I heard some growling sounds and went and followed up there on the other side of the drainage line and found Tingana and Karula mating. So VM and I have returned to that scene to find out what those two kitty cats have been up to. When we left them this morning, they were seeming a little bit reluctant. Karula gave some rather half-hearted, if I'm honest, attempts to seduce Tingana, but it seems as though he is simply too full, too hot, and not really all that interested at the moment. And if you are a regular viewer, you'll know what I mean when I say I actually don't really blame him. He's been a bit of a Don Juan of the leopard world over the last few days. But if you are joining us for the first time and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about a mating pair of leopards, and you are on a live safari. So everything that you're seeing is happening right here on a blistering hot, apparently 30 degrees, which is around 85 Fahrenheit. I think it's hotter, but that might also just be the humidity that's sitting in the air. It feels, the last few days have just felt again and again like a build-up of tension towards a storm that just hasn't happened. And it feels exactly the same way this afternoon. I think all of us are covered in alternating layers of a combination of probably sweat and sunblock, most of all. It is really blistering hot. That might also explain why Tingana is not all that interested in the efforts of poor Karula. I'm going to leave these vultures here. Just a bit more explanation. I think that buffalo has fallen. I don't think that it's a kill. I think he was old and he fell into a drainage line and he couldn't get out. It was very thick and steep, and I think that he's the reason behind the full bellies on Tingana and Karula. And luckily for them, it's right in a position where pretty much every scavenger would have quite a tricky time in getting down to it and really eating it, and indeed finding it. Only just started noticing vultures coming this way. Once I'm done here, and if I have any luck finding them, I might head across, because I hear from many of the viewers, including Heidi, Pretty Nightmare, Astralina and John, that there was an enormous herd of elephants seen at the Arathusa Dam camera. And I actually happened to see those pictures. It really did look like the entire ground was just covered in eddies. But we'll head across and see if we can catch up with any of them later. But for now, let's go and investigate the drainage line where we left Tingana and Karula. There's no tracks coming out, so if Karula is done mating with him, she hasn't started heading back to her usual territory just yet. And typically, female leopards will follow the male around that they're mating with at the time when they are in estrus, and then once they're done, they'll head back to their regular territory. So they're not too worried about territorial boundaries when they have other things on their mind. Hot that it was just time to go home. But we did see Tingana stop and defecate. Now, Tingana, the big male leopard. And Donovan, who's watching us from Maine, you wanted to know if I've gone back to collect Tingana's scat, and I haven't. That's part of my plan for this afternoon. I'm going to head there a little bit later. I just wanted to check up on their position first before I do that. And for new viewers, this is all part of a bigger study. We place the scat samples in these little tubes and we send them off across to Panthera. And Panthera does a huge number of different research projects, but one of them is into determining DNA of the leopards of this area, and in particular the paternity, so the male lines of the leopards in this area, because one thing that leopards tend to do, I'm just checking they haven't snuck back here, is they have a tendency to mate with more than one male during their estrus cycle. And it's a very clever way of making sure that that male is tricked into thinking that he is the father of the cubs, regardless of whether he is or isn't. It's something quite important that we do, and I want to go and get Tingana because as far as I know, we haven't collected him before. Brent was really lucky. He got Mbula's, I think it was it yesterday? It feels like longer, but it must have been yesterday. He got Mbula's scat yesterday. And now we're going to go and get Tingana's as well. So we're doing quite well with the males. I'm heading back to the place where I last saw them, but keep your eyes peeled. If they're not there, they could well be somewhere very, very close. As I said, hot, tired looking, very full bellied, might not be that keen to move away from a potentially easy source of food, that is that dead buffalo. It is certainly though an interesting experience getting into where they were. Keep your eyes peeled for spots and flicks of their white tail, or the white tip of their tail. They could well still be in the vicinity. I haven't seen their tracks coming out. Ah, well, it was hopeful, but unlikely. Leopards are not like lions. They don't tend to stick around exactly where we left them, unfortunately. Now it becomes a question of which way did they go? I think that it might be time to do a little bit of investigating. I want to hop out and just explore around here, see if I can figure out which direction they went into. And in the meantime, I believe that James has some hippos at Buffelshoek, so let's head across to him so he can say hello to you for this afternoon, and I will be back with you a little bit later.
Good afternoon everybody, and welcome to Buffelshoek Dam, where a single hippopotamus has been used as an island by two serrated hinged terrapins until we arrived. The temperature earlier this morning was like that of the iron core in the middle of the earth, and then a wind moving roughly at the same speed as the particles around the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland has come up. That means it's moving very fast indeed. It's blown my hat off at least 4 times. Very strange weather conditions. And as is so often the case, the meteorological societies of various websites that we've checked for the weather have less idea as to what's going on with the weather than I do with the amount of cooking that we have going on in the camp. Now, sorry everybody, a mild confusion in the air there. Anyway, here we are at Buffelshoek Dam. The sun is out. It's a fairly pleasant temperature out here, and the hippopotamus is as we left him this morning, except, well, no, he's not actually. He went out of the water this morning and he's come back. You can see how the water is drying up at a rapid rate, and it was a very it's been a very hot day. Like I say, the wind has come up, and I think that's going to make the evaporation in a little dam like this even more. And so I don't think, unless we get some pretty big rain fairly soon, that this dam is going to last. But both Jandra and I agreed that despite the fact that the wind is blowing, as you can hear it doing now, lost my hat almost. It's actually quite an exciting feeling around the place. I don't know if it's going to blow in any rain. There's certainly a large bank of clouds coming in behind us. We've come into this area hopefully to find Mbula again. We'll see what we can find. We did find some tracks this morning. They disappeared pretty quickly though off the road, and because of the wind and the substrate, the hardness of the ground, I couldn't tell exactly where he'd gone. But we're in the area, and with any luck we'll find him today. So please remember, my name is James Henry. you don't have to remember that, but you do have to remember that you're on a live safari. Gendre is on camera. Hello, Gendre. Dressed in a startling array again, of a kind of it's a shirtless waistcoat, basically, that looks like he went on a bad fishing trip. And the other thing you have to remember is that we'd like to talk to you continuously throughout the drive. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at WildEarthTV. Right, I've waffled on nonsensically for long enough, and we'll head off to see if we can find the recalcitrant and very magnificent Mvula the leopard. Okay, here we go. Righty-ho. First port of call is going to be to take the road around here called Gwari Pan Road, which we didn't drive today, and maybe he will be lurking about there somewhere. This particular area is quite difficult for tracking leopards because it is very thick in the bush, as you can see. The signal is sometimes not very good, but it's still a good haunt for Mvula. I've seen him here once. In fact, Gendre and I saw him on Gendre's first drive. He came walking straight past us, and he walked straight into that bush there, and then it was impossible to find him. We found his tracks a few times in there of late, but until Brent saw him the other day, yesterday in fact, we hadn't seen him again. So I'm rather looking forward to seeing him. So like I was saying, Gendre and I were both agreeing that despite the fact that this wind is slightly odd, it feels quite exciting. It feels like there's an air of expectation in the atmosphere, which is marvellous. Proof, because any prey animals that he wishes to set upon will not have the hearing that they might otherwise, and certainly they won't have the smell either. It's a swirling kind of wind. So very difficult, if an animal does pick up his scent, very difficult for them to try and figure out where the scent's coming from. Fruits and flowers coming out after the little bit of rain that we've had, and the grasses are also starting to shoot now, which is great for the animals. It's not excellent for game viewing, of course, because it does mean that the animals can move away from the concentrated bits of grazing that there are, and so the herds become a bit smaller. Buffalo herds will become smaller, the elephant herds will become a bit smaller. I nearly said effluent, but that isn't in fact a word at all. Now we're in and around the area where I'm hoping that he might have walked, so we could maybe pick up his tracks. Of course, this wind will make the tracking a little bit more difficult. You never know, and if we don't find him, I'm sure we'll find something else exciting. Hello, Susan in Tennessee. Happy birthday to you. You'd like us to find a Mvula or a tortoise for you for your birthday. I fear me that both of those are quite difficult requests. I don't have a tortoise, but I have another shelled animal for you. Stand by. Susan, you can consider this a kind of warm-up, not your main birthday present. Now, this is the shell of a giant land snail, which has a longevity, as one of our very kind viewers told me once, of about 10 to 15 years. And during the wintertime, they put a sort of crust of sand over the top, and then they survive the dry season like that. Now, this has the shell of a spider in it. There's no more snail in it, and I don't think anything else will make a home necessarily of this. But the interesting part to me is this here, where it's been eaten, it's been scraped away, and that could well have been by a tortoise, A tortoise needs lots of calcium to make that shell, Susan. So your birthday present's been chewing on the snail shell, I think, and we will try and find the perpetrator of this dent in the snail's shell as we drive along looking for the leopard. Yeah. There you are, Susan. Happy birthday, on demand, leopard tortoise. One does what one can, doesn't one, John Ray?
Always.
And one feels very happy when one does succeed with blind luck in one's favour. Susan, we'll go and have a closer look at him now. Can you see him from there?
Yeah.
There we go. I'm not going to pick him up. I think you probably by now all know the story. We don't want them to. He's quite far from water. If we pick him up, he'll probably void his bowels, and that can cause dehydration. Look at him go. Beautiful example of a leopard tortoise. With lots of black on his shell, which lots of them don't. Isn't that great? Looks like a male to me, with a very enclosed bottom tail. That carapace, or the top of the shell, is normally slightly hollower or slightly less pronounced around the back in the females. He's moving at quite a speed. Isn't he sweet? I'll move a little bit forward. There we go. And you can see what a clever colour he is. I mean, he's really nicely camouflaged there. He's on a real mission, this fellow. And all around you can hear that wind blowing. Lovely. And he'll be loving the new green grass as well. They love to eat grass. They'll eat a few flowers and that sort of thing as well, but they're purely herbivorous. Whereas the Speaks hinged tortoise, which is the other one that we get here, much rarer than him, actually specializes in eating those giant land snails that we saw. Well, not specializes, but they will eat them. Alright, let's leave this tortoise to himself. There you are, Susan. Happy birthday. Not bad going. You asked and you received. Right, great excitement. Jamie has found, well, not Mvula, but I think the next best thing, and I'll see you just now.
And from discussions of a leopard tortoise to an actual leopard, and one that we have to say a big thank you to VM for spotting the spotted cat, we have a rather, in my opinion, relieved looking Tingana with Karula absolutely nowhere in sight. I think she might be on her way back home. He's giving that sore paw a bit of a clean. For those of you who might have missed it, and I know that it's been something you've seen a couple of times, but he is limping, and it seems as though it's his right front paw that's giving him grief. And I know we had a request for a close-up of the right front paw so we could see. I will change angles, but so far I can't see any obvious injury. Doesn't look like a wound. It might be a sore tendon, but I could stand corrected if we get it from a different angle. But he seems fine, and almost, I think it must be my imagination, but I feel like he seems a little bit happier. He was looking quite under pressure when we saw him last. Now, there's a possibility that she's still around. She might have gone to that buffalo carcass. Fortunately for Viam and myself, the wind has changed direction and is gently wafting scents of it across in our direction. But it doesn't seem to bother him too much, so I suppose we'll have to not let it bother us. He's doing a very, very thorough cleaning exercise. Just a rough idea of where we are. We went up over the side of that drainage line back towards Red Dam and the buffalo, and we bumped into him here. I think that was probably all the movement he was capable of. Now you can see, if you missed the sunrise safari, you can see that enormously big belly of his, and it is a predator's gift to be able to gorge and gorge and gorge until you really look, it looks as though they really couldn't fit anything else in their stomachs, and it pushes up their diaphragm even, and you get them panting in the same way that Tingana is now. Not quite as bad as it was earlier, but it's also not quite as hot, I think, with all this breeze. At least he's managing to cool down. Look at that belly. Hunting away. I'm going to hang out here with him and see what he does, but I'd also like to at least, if not see Karula, get an idea as to where she's disappeared off. Oh, itchy, itchy, itchy. Yeah, mister. The back of your neck doesn't look nearly as uncomfortable as Karula's does. Karula's is looking a little bit bitten and shabby. Oh, shame. I think there are parts of Tingana that are feeling a little bit tender, and it's not just his foot. Typical cat pose. That flexibility level is quite incredible. Foot over head. I'm sure many of you will have seen your cats do that before when they're wanting to have a nice clean up. Now we're sitting with this incredibly beautiful male leopard, but we will at some point have to leave him and go off exploring other avenues. And one thing that was reported is that the Birmingham boys were on the Arathusa, or at least were in the vicinity of the Arathusa property. As far as I know, they were close to Elephant Plains. So Susan, you were wondering if I have any reports on the lions. Now this morning, 2 lions were reported as being seen at the Arathusa Dam camera at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, as far as I know, they haven't been seen since, at least not this morning, but I'll double check with the guides when I bump into somebody. I have tried the Game Drive channel, but it's a bit, on a windy day like this, it seems to blow in all the static and makes listening a bit difficult. The Birmingham boys, it seems, are on Elephant Plains, but only just. So I am going to make my way back across to there. In terms of the females that were seen on the dam camera, I honestly don't know which ones they were, but they were not on Arathusa by the time we started our sunrise safari. At least we get to spend some time with a rather exhausted... Oh, it's windy. I think this is probably the windiest day I've experienced in the Sabi Sands. And it shows absolutely no sign of abating. You can see how the trees are bending double, and I'm having to raise my voice just a little bit in order to be heard. It's definitely really, really hot, but really windy. And it's blowing in all of the dust, it's making me sneeze. But Tingana doesn't seem too bothered. It seems as though this is the way he wants to spend his afternoon. At least it's cooler for him. I'm just wondering whether it's not blowing in a storm. And this leopard is as exhausted as they come. because he's been slowly rotating through the 3 females within his territory, and possibly even a 4th, we're not quite sure. But now leopard mating, we've just caught the end of it, but at its height it can happen about 5 or 6 times an hour, possibly even more right in the beginning, and it happens for 5 days straight, 5 to 7 days straight actually. So you can just do the calculations in your head. I did them this morning very roughly. It comes up to about 650, 700 individual mating sessions for one pairing. Oh! Did something blow into your nose, boy? And Donna, you were wondering why they have to mate so much, and it's something that we spoke about a little bit this morning, but maybe actually I didn't cover it fully. So the male's penis is barbed, which is why when you watch the whole mating process, he grabs her by the back of the neck, because withdrawal is actually quite painful for her, and it means that she turns around and tries to swat him, which is why he grabs her until the act is finished, and then she turns around and gives him a good clip around the ear or around the legs, just to remind him that she's not very impressed, even though she wanted it in the first place. And it's something that's really interesting. You see it in lions and leopards, all of the big cats. It's stimulated ovulation, so she needs that little bit of pain in order to bring her into what is essentially full estrus, so she releases the eggs to be fertilized. And it's wondering what he was looking at. It's a way of essentially ensuring that the best male gets an opportunity to mate with her. So she starts mating with a male, and she gives any bigger, stronger males the opportunity to come along and try and usurp that male, and then actually falls pregnant. So she's getting the best genetics possible for her offspring. It also means that she can move around and move between males and keep them a little bit confused as to who the father might actually be. Although in this case, Tingana appears to have had the run-of-the-mill experience with all of them. They don't seem to be looking any further afield. And I think it must be quite exhausting for him. We have an interesting question. I found this leopard this morning because I was in the drainage line investigating a leopard carcass. And Donna, you wanted to know, Donna Wan, you wanted to know a little bit more about the geology of that drainage line. And quite a lot of it is rhyolite and basalt rocks. Very high in iron, it's quite rich in red, and it's very steep. So it's been quite worn down by the flow of water from Red Dam, or into Red Dam. And the one thing about Arathusa is that it is a giant seep line, which essentially means it's got a bedrock, a very solid rock, overlaid with soil. So the water hits the bedrock, flowing through the soil, and then flows downhill. It's a very simplified version of it. But it does mean that in those points where that water collects, it forms some really nice dramatic drainage lines around the area. And this particular one has obviously got some fertile soils in it, because it's got plenty of vegetation surrounding it. Very, very steep, as I said. Not an easy drainage line to navigate. Oh, that's very pretty. I'll try and get this. I think this is called a maiden, but there's lots of different types and they're quite easy to get confused. But look how beautiful it is. Sorry, this is very contorted for me, but I don't want it to fly away. An interesting exercise in shoulder twisting, but it's perfect Christmas colors, red and shiny green. Very beautiful little thing. Now, as I said, I'm not exactly sure as to what it's called. My original thought was it was a maiden, but which specific kind? There's a couple of different kinds I'll have to go and look up, or maybe you guys can tell me. You've been so good in this particular respect, and this is one of my weak spots in terms of knowledge. out here is the incredible vast array of insects and moths that we find. Oh, it nearly blew off. It is a beautiful, beautiful creature. Very, very striking. As always, you can send those through to #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarth.tv. And it's amazing how the bugs and the moths, oh, bye-bye, I can untwist my arm. It was sort of a bit of a shoulder contortion. It's amazing how much they differ from my sort of areas of longer experience in different parts of the country to here. There's just such a vast array of different things. Just wanted to double check on what Tingana was up to, and he's passed out again. There is a lot of noise you might have heard, and that is the Jacobin cuckoos that have been calling behind me. You can't see them at the moment, but if you were hearing that while I was talking about the insect, then that's what they are. Sure. Very interesting question raised by Barbara, who is a South African. And Barbara, you wanted to know if a leopard is caught outside of a game reserve area. And there are lots and lots of them. They are all around the various farms in the area. They move through communities, mostly unseen and untroubled. You want to know if one of them is caught and transferred to a game reserve, is that fair on the leopard, especially since there will already be established territories there? And then further to that, would it be worse for a male or a female? And that's a really good question, but it's quite a complex one. Do I think it's fair? I think it's fairer than the alternative. For the most part, leopards actually don't do very much serious damage, and they wander around. There are far more of them than we ever realize, wandering through farms and through townships, quite unseen and not bothering anybody. It is, of course, when they become really difficult, if they focus on people's livestock, which is highly, highly unusual actually, and something that they could be compensated for. The only real reason where you need to remove them is if they're in a high density population area. In my personal opinion, there will be those who disagree with me. It's better than the alternative, and the alternative is to have them euthanized. So it's not ideal, but yes, they will have to be and put into a different reserve. Jacobin is making such a noise. I'll try and find him for you in a moment, the bird that's making that call. They are territorial, obviously, and both males and females are territorial. I think personally it's probably worse for a male, but again, it can be done really carefully. So you can look for areas where there's just a little bit of a population vacuum because of the nature of the way that things have developed over the years, and it's a natural vacuum that they can then fill. But again, remember, that depends on the age of the leopard. So a young leopard might be easier to introduce into an area. He can establish himself. He goes through essentially the same process anyway, growing up in a reserve naturally. An older male might have a harder time, and it's then a matter of really careful judgment. I think the males have it a little bit worse than the females, just because of the nature of the really big males, the fact that they're more likely to come to physical conflict if they encounter each other. Females, for the most part, although it does happen, for the most part they move away. Once they might growl at each other a bit and then they move away. But it's a difficult question, it's a very complex question, and personally I feel like if there's animals that are living wild, they've probably been living wild for years and not bothering anybody, then they should probably be left. But it's a little bit more complex than that, and I recognize that. Not really the point where I can go into that conversation in maybe the depth that it needs. But it's a really good question, it's an important one, because unfortunately, given the nature of the way that conservation is, a lot of conservation is mitigating the conflict areas between wild animals and human settlements. So essentially how it goes is it's a battle that's gone back a very long time. Not necessarily a battle, but it sometimes turns into one. He is absolutely fast asleep. He is so exhausted. And since Mr. Tingana is quite asleep, I think I might do a loop around and go and see what else I can find within this block before returning to him. And whilst I do that, I'm going to send you back across to James to see what he's been up to with his afternoon, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
We are driving down a central road in the middle of Djuma, trying to find some tracks of this recalcitrant young male leopard. Well, he's not that young anymore, I suppose. And I'm afraid nothing has come up yet. The expectation as the wind blows and this cloud comes over continues to grow. So it feels like something exciting is going to happen. Anyway, we're driving slowly down here, looking for many interesting things. We did see a duiker, it ran away. We saw a squirrel, it too ran away. We also saw a brown snake eagle, which was very nice. Beautiful birds. And I was asked once, do they eat only brown snakes? And I said, well, in the same way that a black-breasted snake eagle only eats black-breasted snakes. They are called brown snake eagles because they are brown, not because they eat brown snakes. Now, we're driving along a drainage line here, a dry riverbed, and the leopards do like to hang around in and around them, so we're just driving around here hoping that we might see him resting up in the shade of a tree, or maybe up in the leafy boughs of a marula. At the moment, not much. We also saw another tortoise, by the way. Susan, it's our great pleasure to have shown you that leopard tortoise for your birthday. Our great pleasure. I hope it was fun. Certainly we enjoyed it. I love seeing tortoises, and I hope maybe that we'll see a serrated hinged, no, not a serrated hinge, that's the terrapin, a Speaks hinged tortoise, because they're actually really interesting. We'll show how their shells work. And then Teresa in Virginia Beach. You want to know, is there a way to age a tortoise from his shell? There is sort of, but it's not very easy. You can count, a bit like, you know, if you chop a tree down, you can count the rings in a tree. So the little patches on the tortoise's back have got rings that indicate each year. So there's a way of doing it like that, but in years of poor nutrition and years of good nutrition, they'll grow at different rates, and I think sometimes it's not a particularly accurate way of looking at them. So there are ways to do it. I wouldn't back myself 100% to tell you exactly how old a tortoise was if I found it. But yes, there are certainly ways. We have ways and means. Right, we're coming now to the Umlulwati drainage line, or little river. And I think we'll go straight through it. Now, good afternoon to you, PK, on the subject of the chelonids, or shelled reptiles that we get here. You want to know, when do turtles lay their eggs? Now, I'm not sure if you really mean turtles. I'm just looking, sorry, PK, there seems to be a bit of a drag mark. No, it's elephants dragging their feet. PK, out here, when we refer to turtles, we mean sea-dwelling reptiles with the shells. So a leatherback and a green and a hawksbill turtle, those would be turtles that live in the sea. And then there are the terrapins, which are the freshwater sort of turtles, if you like, that live in the pans here, in the dams, and in some of the temporary little puddles even we get terrapins. And then you get the tortoise, which is completely land-based. And we got the leopard tortoise and the Speke's Hinch tortoise. So I'm going to assume that you mean the tortoises to start with, and you want to know when they lay their eggs. And I have to tell you that I'm not entirely sure. I think it's round about now, you know. I think we saw a couple mating the other day, so it's probably round about now. And I think they are pretty seasonal breeders. But I think that it's probably round about now that they're going to do the bulk of their breeding, PK. Ooh, nice big surprise with Jamie. Don't know what it is. Hope it's good. See you just now.
Now, on this windy afternoon, I thought I'd just leave Tingana for the moment and come back quickly to collect his leopard scat. Now, I'm not going to get out of the car, and I wonder if you can spot why. Let's just have a look at the moment. Somebody has arrived to explore the possibility of the buffalo kill. Would you look at that? They were a bit of a surprise, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. I was about to jump out and go and look for Karula. There appears to be a pride of lions in my way. And that would explain why all of the vultures are on the ground as well. Now, I'm going to go a little bit closer. I suspect it's the tsalalas, just looking at those young males, but let's sneak a little bit closer so that we can have a look. How exciting is that? Leopard and lions within 100 meters of each other. And the leopard could not be more unconcerned. And I'm sure he knows these guys are here. I am glad I looked before I jumped out to go and find the leopard scat, because I might have chased them into the drainage line. Hello, girlie. Oh, smelly here. We might also have our answer as to who was at the dam camera, or who was on the dam camera. I can only count 3 lions here, but the rest of them are probably on that buffalo kill. These guys have moved up out of the drainage line because it's a little bit cooler. Oh, somebody's got a very full belly as well. One thing I haven't done, and you'll have to excuse me for one moment, and I don't think it's too much of a problem, but I'm just going to call in on the radio and let the guys know that they are here. But how exciting is this? Very round, very full bellies. Now only essentially the second time I've ever seen the Tsalala Pride. I know that after I went on leave, they stuck around for a little bit. So it's still novelty, very novel lions. And for people joining us, or viewers joining us for the first time and a bit unsure about the dynamics, that is a very young male that you're looking at on your screen, probably about 2 years old, possibly even just a little bit younger, but around 2. There's 3 of them of that age, most likely brothers or cousins. And then from my experience, there's 2 females, one young one and one without a tail, who's slightly older. But it might be a dynamic that's shifting around a lot. And the reason that these guys are so far from their home range of essentially Londolozi, although they do pop up here every now and again, I'm told, but the reason that they're all the way up here is because they've been pushed up, somewhat ironically, by the Matimba males. Now, the Matimba males were the 2 dominant males that were in this area before they were pushed further south by the Birmingham boys. And the Birmingham boys terrorized the prides that were under the Matimbas' control, and the Matimbas promptly disappeared off to the south and terrorized the Tsalalas for a little bit. But things are calming down, as far as I know. I think the reason that this little group of pride, because there's a couple of segments of the Tsalala pride itself, I think the reason that this one is pushed up so far is because of these young boys. They're probably most at risk. They're just at that wrong age, and when I first saw them, I noticed that one of them had quite a large injury on his, I think it was his back left hip. Nasty looking injury. It looked deep and it looked like it had come from a conflict with another lion. And I'm not sure, but I think it might be the one on the right. It's hard for me to tell at this angle. There's a bit of a scar on his back either way, and on his bottom. It might be him. And as I said, I'm sure the rest of them are tucked away in that drainage line with the buffalo, but there's absolutely no way I can get to them at the moment for where I think the buffalo is. I think essentially to get there I would probably have to drive directly where these two lions are lying. Might be the only open patch that I can find. That was a nice surprise. Haven't even been out for an hour and a half and we've found leopards and lions, all within very close proximity of each other. As I said, just bear with me for one moment. I do need to just go onto the Game Drive channel and call this in. Yeah, stations I've got Shlamingala just north of that, Nyari Bamba by Red Dam. Shlamingala looks like Tsalalas. Interestingly, just as I called that in between bursts of static, it sounds as though the Majingalane males, who I think were the at least fairly originally dominant over the Tsalalas, it sounds as though they are close to Elephant Plains with the rest, or two of the Tsalala breakaway females. I think that's what was said, but it might be something I'll have to confirm a bit later with the guides. Now, I mentioned earlier about enormous bellies and panting, and that's exactly what we're seeing here with this female. She's looking absolutely exhausted. I wonder when these lions, I'll try that again, sentence went a bit wrong, but I wonder when these lions did turn up here. I actually almost wonder if they were here when we found those leopards before. It wouldn't be unheard of for lions and leopards to be in very, very close proximity. I didn't see them when I was investigating the buffalo carcass, and I was standing just on the other side of the drainage line. But maybe if they were completely flat. But then, as I said, I think Tingana and Karula were feeding on the buffalo, so maybe they've just arrived. But I think, personally, there's a good chance that these were the lions that were seen on the Arathusa dam camera last night. If they were two females, I don't actually know. The heat is definitely broken as well. The clouds are advancing, and I'm sure that for lions like this must be a welcome relief from the earlier heat of the day. That is something that I mentioned when I first saw them, or at least I was asked about before. And Carla, you were saying that you would love to see Junior join up with these 3 young boys and form a much stronger coalition. Now, Junior is a sub-adult lion, basically an adult male lion. He's almost at that stage, from the Nkuhuma Pride. And he is at the age where it's time for him to go off on his own. But it must be a really terrifying prospect to be a young male lion heading off all on your own without the support of any brothers or cousins. And of course that's why males form coalitions, is because they just add that little extra sense of security and safety. Now these 3 young males, as difficult a position as they have been in, they will always have each other, and when they do separate from the pride, they will separate together. Now it's not impossible, it's unlikely, but it's not impossible that Junior could join up with them. The only problem is that Junior's probably got another year or so, or even more, to wait until these males are old enough to separate away from their pride. But it's definitely not unheard of and not unusual. Are you sitting up, boy? For males to join together even if they're not related. Lions are actually not too picky about who they form coalitions with. They're quite happy to join up with unrelated males. This young boy, with just a hint of a mohawk coming through, he's definitely a good year or so younger than Junior, probably about a year and a half. He's very, very young still. But lions, as I said, are not picky, because each member of a coalition will probably get a chance to mate with a female and pass on their genetics. Oh, there's that scar. Well, there's a scar. Some of that almost looks fresh-ish. There's still a little bit of pink showing as it's healing. And those, at least that wound on his bottom there at the top of his tail, I think looks like a puncture wound. Shame, little one. Been through the wars. Yes. Oh, it's exhausting. I mean, not to complain or anything. You know, we've just had an afternoon of leopard and lion within a few hundred meters of each other. But there are some smaller cats that roam around, and Barbara, you were wondering if I've ever seen any of them. So for viewers not acquainted with the South African wildlife, or the low-veld wildlife, out here we get a couple of smaller hunting cats known as servals, caracals, African wildcat. There's a couple of other little cat species that are far less common and far less frequently seen. Now, I have yet to see one, Barbara. I believe that there have been a couple of serval sightings on live safari drives. I'm not too sure about caracal. I don't know, have you seen a caracal? No. It depends on the area that you're in. With such a high leopard density as is in the Sabi Sands, it makes life a little bit more difficult for those tinier hunting cats. They are around. They will definitely be here. In other areas I've worked in, I used to work in a place that had no lions and no spotted hyenas. It was a reserve. I've worked there very seldom, but it was a reserve that was in the process of being rehabilitated. And I saw a lot more in the way of rare species like the African wildcat. And of course the biggest threat to African wildcat, especially in an area like this, will be exposure to domestic cats, so feral cats or cats from the local communities that might stray in and wander around, and if they are not neutered or spayed, then they mate with the other bloodline. Where did you come from? There's the third male. I don't see him. Hello, boy. Have you been eating buffalo? It's not very nice buffalo anymore. It's been sitting in the heat of the drainage line, slowly cooking. Yes, he's definitely been eating away. And I have to be honest, I think lions are extraordinary looking, but I have a certain soft spot for them when they're at this kind of age. It's that slightly gangly teenage look where they have not really come into their manes at all, and they just look a little bit almost vulnerable in a way. And maybe that's just because I know that they are. And he's giving himself a good clean after that buffalo meal. And when I stuck my nose down there this morning, there was still plenty of meat on it, which is actually what originally led me to suspect that it had fallen into the drainage line. So at least these lions are getting a solid meal. The nice thing about watching these 3 young boys is that the bonds between male lions somehow stay or seem to be far, far stronger than the bonds between females and males, or even females and each other. Actually, the young males show far more affection. If you watch the Birmingham boys, whenever they leave each other and they walk back and reunite, even if it's just from one patch of shade to the next, they so often go and rub heads. And that's a combination of practical scent marking, rubbing each other's scents on each other's faces, and then I think there's a little bit of affection involved. Still cleaning those feet. Rolling over, looking very happy with life and definitely well fed. But as I said, there's a couple of wounds on the males that look fairly fresh. And Debbie, you're watching all the way from Vancouver. You heard that they had a confrontation with the Nkuhumas, and could those wounds possibly be from that? The answer is yes, I think, and this is the young male that I was referring to. I was on leave and haven't heard the full report yet as to what happened, and obviously I think it's something that I need to chat to other guides about who were in the area. But it could well be. It's quite often when prides have confrontations, there's a lot of noise and maybe a nip or two, but for the most part it doesn't get as incredibly physical and actually incredibly dangerous as, say, an encounter with males that are part of the coalition. So it could well be that he just got in the way and the Nkuhumas were not too impressed with his presence and bit him on the bottom. We better hope it's actually that scenario. It's far better for him, because typically prides are not going to do as much damage as they would, as a coalition of males would do. But it could be, and it does happen where they come to blows physically. It suddenly got really cold and really cloudy. It's definitely some crazy weather happening out here in the Sabi Sands. But yeah, it could well be a conflict between the Nkuhumas and the Salalas. It is bound to happen when a pride like this one moves out of its sort of typically established home range. Now, you can't really think of it as pictures of or pieces of a jigsaw in terms of pride dynamics. The one will overlap with the home range of the other, but they typically stay out of their way. They stay out of each other's way. When the one pride is in the north of their territory, the other might push up into the south of that territory. But then for a breakaway like this that is trying to keep their young males safe and to move as far away and out of both the Birmingham and the Matimba males' attention, it means that they automatically then start to push into other home ranges of other territories. I'm still looking for that female without the tail. I haven't seen her just yet.
There's a female back there.
Is there a female?
I just saw the ears. I think she's down now.
I think VM's also spotted what Laura in Pennsylvania has spotted, which was an ear twitching somewhere in the back. I definitely can't see her from my angle, but at least we know she's there. The odd ear twitch every now and again, and in a moment what I'll do is I'll reposition. But let's just stick with here for now. We sitting with the gentle waves of buffalo scent every now and again getting to us. It hasn't been too bad. But Christine in North Carolina, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but in terms of how that buffalo may have died, I actually think it's a possibility that he tripped down into the drainage line. That being said, animals are very short, and I realize now we started the sunset safari with them in the tree, and I realize now, of course, that's why they haven't descended onto the carcass. It's because there's an entire pride of lions guarding it, and they tend to be quite possessive about their food.
One of the only birds that is able to hover in mid-air like that. There are two we get here. One is called a black-shouldered kite, and the other is the black-breasted snake eagle. It's really special to see it like that. And you can see it's facing due east. There is an enormous weather system moving in here, and you can hear and feel the wind. You can see the the sky has gone totally grey. I'm just going to try and get underneath this magnificently clever bird. Now, of course, if he turns even slightly, he's going to be flung at a hell of a speed to the north or to the west. Look at him go. Look at him. See how he folds his wings there. Ah, it's wonderful. We'll try and keep up with him. If it's going to rain or not. There's just to be something in the horizon there. It might just be an enormous cloud of dust. It might be an enormous storm. Oh, there he comes. Andrea, I think we'll get him now. The gap here. Oh, that's great. There you can sort of see his black breast. He's quite high up. He's gaining height. That's why he's so little. Okay, we'll try and go forward. Now the slight movement of feathers on his legs and on his wings, dropping his legs, and disappeared off to the west. See that often at all. Marvelous. There you've got an idea of what's. This is astonishing weather. It really is. It's so exciting to be out in weather like this. Lovely, beautiful spots. Now, with the wind, obviously, the risk season is fire. And Safari Shari, you want to know, with this wind and the dryness, could there be a fire risk? No. I'm just going to stop right exactly why it's not a risk. Right, so Jean-Andre, if you can just sort of point the camera into this open area here, and I'll get now. Here, the grass is the main. We've had enough in the soil to negate any kind of risk of fire at the moment. So Safari Shari, no, I don't think we're going to have any kind of fire. There are three things that fire needs to move. I remember that there are three things. Whether I remember what those three things are, I'm not sure. One is the ambient temperature. It's got to be pretty hot. The other is humidity, and then the other is four things, sorry. Ambient temperature, humidity, wind, and also the fuel load. Are you happy with that, Jean-Andre?
Yes, okay. Satisfactory.
Those four things. And we don't have a fuel load here. We've got wind, we don't have heat, and we've got lots of humidity. So the chances of a fire here are almost negligible. Right, on we go. The temperature's dropped, I would say 15 degrees almost from when we went out. Quite amazing. Let's go Impala Road. I don't think that's rain. I think we're going to be alright rain-wise. It's dust.
We do apologise for that. The satellite was going a little bit haywire, so we had some signal issues, but look who we found. Well, actually it was VM again, if I'm honest. The wildebeest found her. We were going back towards Tingana and Karula just popped herself out and went down for a drink at the dam. We were just saying, as I was doing a U-turn away from the lions to say we think maybe Karula might still be in the area, and she certainly proved that she was. Hello, girl. Now, interestingly, Tingana's made his way down to the dam as well, and he's moved up the drainage line a little bit towards where that buffalo carcass is. Now, as I said, I'm certain he knows the lions are there. She's going that way as well. This could be a very interesting moment. Now, I know that I can only travel so far up that drainage line, but I'm going to stay with her for as long as possible before we have to reposition. Gorgeous girl. As you can see, there is another vehicle who's come to join us. He was looking at Tingana, who's further up in front of where Karula's walking. I can't see him anymore. Oh, she's going to go up and out. That's actually easier for us. Let's try and stay with her in that way. She's jogging. Where is she jogging to? Oh, it's Tingana's up. Must be up there. Where'd she go? Oh, she flopped down there. she's playing. I think she's, there he is. Here's Tingana. Just hold on for one moment. She's still trying her seduction. They haven't finished mating. What an epic afternoon. Okay, let's go. Try and do this fairly quickly. That was amazing. Did you see how she went and played with him? Being so flirty for a leopard that I thought was done with her whole mating experience. Maybe they were just too tired and too hot and too full this morning. Oh, it's windy. Where'd you go, kitty cats? Here we go. Got them on our left. I'm just going to stop here for the moment. I want to see what she's going to do, what he's going to do. I think he wants to go. Oh, he's going to lie down there. Is she going to try flirting with him? He is surveying his domain. Just a rough distance and a rough update. The Salala Pride are feeding close to a buffalo kill, probably about 50 meters away from these two mating leopards. Look at Karula. I think the drop in temperature has given her a new lease on life. A little bit of scent marking. Is she going to go flirt with him again? I think she is. Forward a little bit. Here we go, the mating leopard dance. I'm sorry, this is our best position for getting them. Our signal's terrible in the drainage line, so we have to be at this angle. But look at that, looking down on them. He's not interested, still not interested. She's going to rub herself into whatever she's found on the ground. You can hear her purring. I'll shift around, Liam, so that I can help you out there. Let's just see if she continues. Hitting him with her rear end and smacking him in the face with her tail. Here we go. Come on, Tigana. That last little bit as she rolls over, the lordosis reflex. And she definitely looks like a happy cat. Approaching this whole process with much more enthusiasm than she has in the past. A bit earlier when it was too hot. He looks a little bit more awake as well, unless I'm imagining things. No matter how many times you see it, watching leopards mate is still the most incredible sight. You can see that as we went from Tingana to Karula, an incredible difference in their size. Especially in that powerful neck. Amazing stuff. And I think somewhere in this entire process I have driven over somebody's scat. I'm not sure if it's leopard or lion, but I just get the odd whiff of it coming through. Oh, that was incredible. They are amazing creatures. I'm going to shift around slightly so that we can get a view of them from a different angle. It's going to be tricky to find a good spot here. And whilst I try and look for one so that we don't put anybody else on TV, we'll head across to James for a cameo link and be back with these two very, very shortly.
So we've been driving around since you last saw us, and we've come across a little sort of couple of zebra, and he is exhibiting an interesting behavior called phlegmon. There you can see him, well, you could see him doing it. I'm just going to move a little bit closer. He'd bent his top lip up like this, And what he was doing is testing the female in front of him. Now Jean-Ray thought she looked quite pregnant, but she might not be. Now I think she is pregnant. But that feminine behavior that the male was doing behind her is to test whether she's ready to mate or not. And if she's that pregnant, I think it's highly unlikely. Let's just watch them through here. There's the rest of the kinship group. A whole lot of zebra now, and a whole lot of kudu as well. Very lovely. Ooh, they're frolicking around in the wind. Now Genevieve in New York City, where I imagine the wind probably blows more than it does here during your winter times, you ought to know if they can smell better or worse in this time of, when it's windy like this, and does it affect their smelling of human beings? Genevieve, this wind will dissipate most smells. It's swirling, it's not coming necessarily from the same direction, so what it will probably do is create a sort of the animals won't smell it as obviously as they would if it was a gentle breeze blowing towards them. That said, it is coming predominantly from the east, so if we were right on the eastern side of these zebras, then absolutely they would smell us pretty quickly. But that's why they're a bit more skittish in the wind. They can't hear and they can't smell nearly as well as they could if it was still. I'm just going to move a little bit forward. There's a kudu staring at us in utter astonishment. There she is. And she too, with those huge satellite dish ears, will be listening all over the place. They've also been frolicking about a bit, and I think that frolicking behavior, as much as it looks like it's play behavior, is probably also kind of anti-predator stuff, that they're looking around all the time, just checking to see if there's anything around. What an incredibly lucky time you've had on Arathusa today, with 2 leopards, 6 lions. Sounds marvellous. We're just going to drive a little bit off-road here, see if we can't get a slightly better view of the zebra especially. They will be a little bit skittish of us, and like I've said, if they smell us, they can see us, right? I mean, their eyes are better than ours, they can see us perfectly well. But if they smell us, animals tend to react a lot more adversely. They tend to get a lot more frightened, even though they can see us. Sneak a bit. Is that alright for you, Jean? Okay. Loving the new green grass. You can see. Right, let's go quickly across to Jamie. I think there's action going on there.
Guys, I know that this is a really difficult visual, but the leopards are coming up to the lions. Let me just stop and see. I'm on the opposite side of the dam. The lions are right there. I had the visual of the leopards. They are probably about 20 meters from the lions. The lions are watching them. I'm going to shift forward a bit to see if I can get a better view. They're coming for that buffalo. There's a leopard. You see their view across the other side of the drainage line. Oh, there you go. She's running. There's a snarl. I think, let me go backwards. Back around. I don't think the lion chased her. I think she went to chase her. But either way, Karula's come shooting back that way, across the drainage line. Lions are up and moving, coming this way, to where Karula ran. Let's try and keep up. There's a lion. She did chase her. Sorry, I know that visual is very, very difficult. It was back in there across the drainage line. Where did Karula go? The lions are moving with purpose towards the leopards. I'm going to try and get you a good visual. Gorillas run somewhere in this direction. The lions have stopped now. Must be somewhere here hiding in this drainage line. Here you can see a lion looking back. It's the young males who've actually chased as well. Let's just stop for one moment. Gorilla just gave a growl and I just saw a flash of spots shooting towards us. Don't worry, they definitely didn't get her, and they definitely didn't get Tingana. I think she's just ducked down to the drainage line. The lions are as confused in this situation as we are. They're not sure where she's gone. Let's go see. That was incredible. I know it was very, very thick. It was just a growl from, it could either have been Gorilla or it could have been one of the lions. Go forward a little bit. Gorilla would have popped out somewhere here. She might, there's the lions. They're looking for her. Well, they're looking for them actually. Forward, backwards a little bit for them. Get a good view. One of the young boys. They're scouting around, but they are definitely no match for those two leopards. And the females is also approaching. Now Gorilla's gone to ground, I think somewhere in this drainage line, and she's just sprinted in and then ducked down. Tingana, I didn't see which way he went. Lions are looking. I did not expect those leopards to get so close to those lions without realizing. Just sitting for one moment. I want to see where the lions look and what they decide. They've decided to give it up. Now there's absolutely no way that they caught up with either of those leopards. They were too fast for them and far too camouflaged. But let's go down and see. Maybe they're going to pop out at the dam. They're going to move away from them. There's plenty of perfect hiding places for a leopard. Oh, leopard in a tree. That's where Gorilla went. How incredible is this sighting? Where Tingana went, I honestly don't know. But it does answer a question for us which was asked this morning, which was whether or not Tingana's paw would disadvantage him, or whether adrenaline would kick in and he would move away really fast. And he has just disappeared. He might be up a tree somewhere around here as well. First point of refuge for a leopard away from a lion. Let's get a little bit closer to her. Now, she's tense and she's nervous because she's just been chased by lions. So I'm going to shift very close, I mean not very close, very slowly, and not get too close. She's looking back towards the lions. Keeping my eyes peeled for Tingana as well. I don't know where he disappeared to. Is right into the sun. Stop here for the moment just to let her get comfortable. There we go. You can see that look. She's looking back towards where the lions were. And that was an incredible interaction, but there's no way they were going to catch this clever girl out. No way. Karula's just been around the block too many times to get caught out by a couple of ranging lions. There's no way. It's the tip of her tail. She's gone up as far as she can into the knobthorn, and there she will stay until she feels a bit more comfortable. Now, that was an absolutely incredible interaction between the two. And I said earlier they were maybe 100 or so meters apart, and they were mating earlier. And Sarah in Ohio, you've asked a really good question, which was why wouldn't the lions go and investigate the leopard's mating, or the sounds of the leopard's mating? It's a good question. I think because they were too full-bellied and too lazy, they weren't going to go and actively seek her out. I think if they'd been lying in the sun with less full bellies, they might have gone to explore, but they're much less curious than leopards are, especially when they've just eaten. But as soon as those leopards got close enough to be even slightly vaguely a threat to the kill, then they were immediately up and about. Oh girl, yes, you're very clever. Those lions have gone, they're lying down. I can't see them from where I am, but I'm pretty sure they're just lying down. They've given up on the search. I said earlier that they are no match for the leopards, and what I actually mean in terms of answering Rocky Knight's question, yes, brute strength and size, absolutely, the lions would completely kill the leopard if they could get hold of her. What I meant was, in this particular environment, rocky drainage lines, thick vegetation and big trees, and two leopards that are pretty experienced in terms of dealing with lions like that, it becomes a much more even playing field. They're faster than the lions and they're more agile, and the lions didn't approach that in a very intelligent way at all. They just immediately shot out with lots of noise. So when I say they're no match for the lions, I don't mean strength, I mean skill and the way that they navigate, especially at an age that they're at, where both of them will have experienced this scenario multiple times before. And just to let you know, leopards do go and investigate lion sightings. It often happens. Now I want to shift forward because the vehicle, I want to try and get the sun on the other side of Karula as well, although that's a beautiful image. But the vehicle that's heading away from us, they were on the other side of the drainage line. I want to know if they saw... Oh, he's disappearing. Don't go. I want to know if they saw where Tingana went. I will ask in a moment. I think he's going to go back towards the lions. But we're going to stay with Karula for the moment. I want to shift onto the other side of her. She's perfectly relaxed with us. So I'm going to go up around so that we can see her from the other side. I'm actually going to roll forward.